No one in Kruger National Park expected that Musa Dlamini would trade his quiet ranger rounds for a hunt that would pull back the curtain on a global criminal machine. For years, his life had followed a rhythm as steady as the sunrise over the savannah, boots crunching dry earth, eyes scanning the bush, reading stories written in dust. Musa was not a man of many words, but he understood the land in a way few ever could. Every broken twig, every disturbed patch of soil, every distant call carried meaning. He was born in Limpopo, raised among elders who spoke of elephants as ancient spirits and the veldt as a living law. They taught him patience, they taught him respect, and above all, they taught him that nature always tells the truth if you know how to listen. By 2013, Musa had become one of the most respected trackers in his ranger unit. Quiet, precise, almost invisible in the bush, he could follow a trail hours old across rocky ground where others saw nothing. But the park he loved was changing. The silence was being broken, not by thunder or predators, but by gunfire. At first, the killings were sporadic, a rhino here, another there. Rangers would find carcasses stripped of their horns, faces hacked apart with brutal efficiency. But soon, the incidents multiplied. What had once been isolated became relentless. By the mid-2010s, the numbers were staggering. Over 1,000 rhinos lost in a single year. The crisis peaked in 2014, sending shockwaves across the world. Kruger had become a battlefield. But this was not a simple war between ranger and poacher. The men crossing the fences at night were no longer desperate locals with crude tools. They carried military-grade rifles. They moved in coordinated teams. They had radios, transport, and escape routes mapped with precision. Someone, somewhere, was organizing all of this. Musa began to notice patterns. One dry June night, under a moon so thin it barely lit the ground, he came across a set of tracks unlike any he had seen before. The spoor was clean, deliberate. The men who made it knew exactly what they were doing. There was no wandering, no hesitation, just purpose. He followed. The trail led him beyond the usual patrol zones, past familiar landmarks, and into terrain rarely charted. It crossed the Sabi River, where the water moved slow and dark. It wound through burnt Mopani scrub, the air still carrying the scent of ash. And then it pushed toward the edges of the park, toward the blurred line where protected wilderness met human settlement. That was where the story changed. What Musa found there was not just evidence of poachers, but infrastructure. Hidden fuel caches buried beneath brush, fresh tire tracks leading to concealed routes, discarded radio batteries. This wasn't survival hunting, it was logistics. It was organized. Over the following weeks, Musa returned again and again, each time uncovering more pieces of the puzzle. He began documenting everything, sketching locations, noting times, memorizing frequencies from intercepted radio chatter. His notebook became more than a ranger's log. It became evidence. His unit adapted with him. They moved quietly, operating less like patrol officers and more like investigators. Camera traps were placed along suspected routes. Night ambushes were planned with precision. They started tracking not just animals, but people. And the deeper Musa looked, the bigger the picture became. Horns were not just being taken, they were being moved through a chain. Poachers in the bush, drivers waiting at pickup points, middlemen operating out of farmhouses, shipments disguised as legitimate goods, paperwork forged with alarming skill. The trail stretched far beyond Kruger. It led north toward Musina, a dusty border town buzzing with trade. From there, routes branched into larger freight corridors, roads that carried coal, livestock, and now, hidden among them, rhino horn. Eventually, the chain extended to ports and beyond, feeding demand in distant markets across Southeast Asia. Musa realized something chilling. The men he tracked were just the beginning. They were the lowest rung of a ladder that reached into international syndicates. And somewhere, along that ladder, corruption made everything possible. a port official who didn't ask questions, a courier who looked the other way, a farm owner who falsified records. Each played a role, each kept the system moving. The danger escalated quickly. One night, during a planned ambush, Musa and his team found themselves outnumbered. The poachers opened fire without hesitation. Bullets tore through the bush, snapping branches and kicking up dirt. Musa dove behind a termite mound, his heart pounding as the night erupted into chaos. For minutes that felt like hours, they were pinned down. When the shooting finally stopped, the poachers had vanished into the darkness. Musa's team survived, but barely. That night changed him. This was no longer just about protecting animals. It was about dismantling something far bigger and far more dangerous. With the help of investigative journalists and a provincial detective unit, Musa began sharing what he had uncovered. Slowly, carefully, they mapped the network. License plates were traced, phone records analyzed, suspicious permits flagged. By 2015 and 2016, the pressure began to show. Raids were conducted, arrests were made, shipments were seized before they could leave the country. International cooperation increased, with agencies like Interpol stepping in to track the syndicates across borders. The story reached the media. The world started paying attention. But victory was never complete. For every route shut down, another emerged. For every arrest, a replacement stepped in. The network adapted, shifting like a living organism. Musa understood this better than anyone. Years later, standing on a quiet rise at dawn, he watched a small group of white rhinos grazing peacefully. The air was cool, the light soft, the moment fragile. It was the kind of scene that reminded him why he started. He had scars now, some visible, others not. He had lost friends. He had seen the worst of what people could do. But he had also seen what was possible when people fought back. What Musa uncovered changed the way conservation was understood. It was no longer just about protecting animals with fences and patrols. It was about intelligence, about international law, about cutting off demand and exposing corruption. It was a war fought in shadows as much as in the wild. And Musa, once just a quiet ranger walking his rounds, had become part of something much bigger, a fight that stretched across continents. Kruger remains a place of beauty and danger, but it is also a front line. And on that front line, people like Musa continue the work, patient, determined, and unyielding, buying time, one hard-won victory at a time, for a species that cannot fight for itself.